The new era that opened up with the end of the Cold War brought with it a renaissance of mercenaries, in the form of private security companies and private military companies, sometimes known as just private armies. Both state and non-state organizations often rely on their services as these companies are more flexible, cheaper, less responsible, and often much more capable than the regular military. The 21st century conflicts, particularly the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, had seen private armies get involved at all levels, from logistical support to high-intensity operations, and one of the nations that has most relied on the use of private armies during this period was Russia. Even though the Russian constitution specifically stipulates that all security and defense matters belong exclusively to the state, which would make the establishment of private military companies an illegal practice in the country, there are several important legal loopholes that make such an existence possible. While individuals cannot serve as mercenaries, state-owned companies can have security forces of their own, and through a generally dense network of subcontractors, Russian citizens end up working as private military personnel despite the nominal ban. Another solution used is to register companies abroad, which allows Russian authorities to bypass all legal barriers in their own country, making most Russian private military companies prefer to recruit exclusively Russian citizens. And it was thanks to this structure that the Wagner Group was born. Its origins can be traced back to Lieutenant Colonel Dmitry Valerievich Utkin, a veteran of the First and Second Chechen Wars, who served in the Russian Special Forces and abandoned his military career in 2013. After leaving the military, he began providing services for the Moran Security Group, a private company founded by Russian military veterans, involved in security missions and training around the world, and specializing in anti-piracy security. In the same year, after Moran's top management became involved in the creation of another organization, which was named Slavonic Corps, whose function was to safeguard oil pipelines and refineries, Utkin was sent to Syria to protect these immensely valuable assets. However, after a disastrous operation in October of that year, in which Utkin was involved, resulted in the death of 6 of his men by enemy forces, he decided to leave the organization and create his own, taking as an example other successful Western organizations such as the American Blackwater. In doing so, he founded the core of what would become the mysterious Wagner Group, in order to more efficiently capitalize on the lucrative business of private military companies. Utkin's nom de guerre during operations in Syria was Wagner, one that itself was a tribute to the German classical composer Richard Wagner, Adolf Hitler's favorite. Utkin's choice of this name stems from his admiration for the Third Reich and Nazi teams, being himself associated with several neo-Nazi-oriented groups, and a photo of him showing tattoos of SS insignia at the base of the neck, as well as the Wehrmacht's Adler, the Wehrmacht's eagle, on his right chest. Although Dmitry Utkin was the founding element and first commander of the Wagner Group, its funding and control reportedly belonged to Yevgeny Prigozhin, a Russian tycoon who enjoys close ties to President Vladimir Putin. Known as Putin's chef, Prigozhin owns a chain of restaurants in the country that always welcomes the president and foreign dignitaries, as well as a number of other shady companies that are accused of interfering in electoral processes in other countries to secure Russian interests. While any official documentation on the Wagner Group is extremely sparse, Prigozhin and Utkin's connections were proved in 2017, when the latter was confirmed to be the new chief executive of Concord Management, Prigozhin's restaurant management company. The group's first armed actions took place in February 2014 in Ukraine, when President Viktor Yanukovych's escape to Moscow resulted in the outbreak of fighting in the east of the country by separatist forces, and Putin at the same time ordered the annexation of the Crimean Peninsula. During this operation, which took place with almost no opposition, Wagner's mercenaries became known as the Little Green Men, for wearing only their greenish uniforms without any insignia. Shortly after the conclusion of this operation, on May 21st, the mercenaries were sent to reinforce the separatist separatist forces in Luhansk, acting there in the most diverse missions, from the most conventional ones, such as carrying out attacks against Ukrainian troops, to controlling road crossings and plant explosives. In early 2015, the Wagner Group supported separatist forces in the Battle of Debaltseve, a city located southeast of Luhansk that was still controlled by Ukrainian forces. Personally commanded by Utkin, the mercenaries were directly engaged in the fighting, and despite multiple casualties between dead and wounded, managed to drive the enemy out on February 18. Utkin himself was seriously wounded, having a shrapnel puncture in his liver. A few months later, the group was sent to work in the Syrian civil war, landing in Damascus to support the Russian intervention troops, whose mission was to save the government of President Bashar al-Assad from destruction. At first, the Wagner Group acted in protection of pipelines, oil and natural gas wells, but gradually began to perform tasks of greater relevance to the conflict, with mercenaries taking an active part in Russian offensives. Acting as the Kremlin's invisible hand, the Wagner Group carried out missions in which Russian troops were officially not supposed to be involved, and its great importance was officially recognized by Moscow in December 2016, when Dmitry Utkin and other commanders of the organization were awarded the Order of Courage, personally by Vladimir Putin. A special detachment within the Wagner Group is Task Force Rusich, considered an elite sabotage and reconnaissance unit, founded in 2014 by Alexey Milchakov, a militant with well-known neo-Nazi roots who became famous in 2011 for executing a puppy, decapitating it, and posting the feat on his social networks. Milchakov was formerly accused of war crimes practices in Ukraine in 2014, having allegedly cut off the ears of dead enemy soldiers, having been banned from entering the European Union since 2015. In 2017, a gigantic opportunity arose for the Wagner Group, when the Syrian government offered it a new type of contract. Damascus would extend to private organizations that managed to gain and maintain efficient protections of oil refineries and infrastructure the right to keep a percentage of the profits from their exploration. This fact caused the Wagner Group to be hired by several Russian companies to expel anti-Assad rebel forces from those places, to immediately restart oil extraction. Thanks to this, they were able to start an unprecedented expansion. At the beginning of 2016, the Wagner Group had around 1,000 employees, a number that later rose to 5,000 in August 2017 and 6,000 in December of the same year. With regard to its recruitment and joining processes, the Wagner Group is deeply discerning about the people who will join their ranks. The vast majority of men who make up the Wagner Group are former members of the Russian Special Forces and ex-GRU, the Russian Military Intelligence Agency, with the rest being Chechens and Ukrainians, with an average age between 35 and 55 years old. The main base of the Wagner Group is located in a town called Molkino, in the Krasnodar district of Russia, in barracks belonging to the Russian Ministry of Defense, but with no official ties to it, being recognized by Moscow as just a children's camp center. Once in training, recruits can no longer use social networking services and other internet resources. One of the most stringent criteria for membership is the obligation to sign a 10-year confidentiality agreement established between the parties. And in case of breach of confidentiality, the company reserves the right to terminate the employee's contract without paying him any money. Company employees are not allowed to post photos, texts, audio and video recordings or any other information on the internet obtained during training. They also cannot reveal their location to anyone, whether they are in Russia or in another country. Cell phones, tablets and other means of communication are confiscated by the company, and their use is only authorized at certain times with the authorization of their commander. Passports and other documents are withheld, and in return, company employees received an identification tag with no name, just a personal number. The Wagner Group has dramatically expanded its operations in recent years, being seen in operations in Mozambique, Libya, Madagascar, Sudan, Central African Republic, Venezuela, and other nations. In 2017, the Wagner Group sent around 500 men to quell local uprisings against the government of Sudanese dictator Omar al-Bashir, and in the Central African Republic they provided training to the forces of President Faustin-Archange Touadéra, later manning the country's lucrative mines and integrating the president's personal security detachment. Townsend. After the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, mercenaries entered the scene once again. Several sources point out that Wagner's men had already infiltrated Ukraine weeks before the start of the fighting, acting as saboteurs and scouts for the Russian forces, marking targets for missile attacks and field artillery. Other reports indicate that the Wagner Group unsuccessfully planned and executed infiltration missions in Kiev to assassinate President Volodymyr Zelensky, Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal, and Presidential Chief of Staff Andriy Yermak, and other Ukrainian officials were also listed as alleged assassination targets. In addition, according to the statements by General Stephen Townsend, head of the US Africa Command, the Wagner Group had begun recruiting troops on that continent, with the aim of sending them to fight the Ukrainians. Townsend added that these units would likely be transferred primarily from Libya, where hundreds of Russian mercenaries are supporting Field Marshal Khalifa Haftar, the country's most powerful military leader. However, the official structure of the Wagner Group remains a great mystery, as all access to their documentation is vetoed by the Russian government. And although many speculate that the company is formally registered in Argentina, others believe that it does not have a formal legal identity. Its close links with the Kremlin, its actions in the field in the most varied countries, and its tentacles that operate in cyberspace still arouse much curiosity and deep questions that remain unanswered. The consensus is that today the Wagner Group is the largest private army in the world, acting behind the scenes as Moscow's swift and unpunished striking force.